Ravens, Bills, week one. It's a divisional round rematch to kick off the 2025 season on Sunday night. And there are plenty of storylines for these two teams.
Yeah, early season playoff implications in week one. We're going to get you ready for it here next on the Locked On Podcast Network.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Bills and Locked On Ravens. We are proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, we want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate you all being here very, very much. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens. We're here to get you ready for week one, Sunday night football. It's a big one. Everyone will be waiting for this one on Sunday night. Kevin, welcome in. I'm excited to talk with you about this game. And of course, I'm excited to get this season underway.
Yeah, this is my personal favorite matchup. Of course, maybe there's a little bias in that, but of course, you have two great quarterbacks, two great teams, two teams that are hoping to obviously get to a Super Bowl and knock off the Chiefs. And of course, I think that starts in week one. I always say September losses don't matter in September, but they certainly matter in December when you're fighting for seeding. And we saw how the seeding really shaped up for the AFC, where the Bills got the 2 seed, the Ravens got the 3 seed. And of course, that game in Orchard Park, it's a very tough place to play, especially when you get down to the January weather. So of course, both teams looking to get the best of the other here in a new season. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it's all about giving yourself the best chance to go on a run in the postseason. And I think that's what both of these teams are obviously aspiring to do. And whether you're hosting Kansas City, you're hosting Buffalo, you're hosting Baltimore, you don't want to go to those places. And so obviously there's a lot on the line in week one. Now, week one can be a liar. We know that. And by the end of the year, week one will probably feel like 100 years ago. But this is what's at stake for both of these teams. You want that head-to-head tiebreaker. And so as we start to really dive into this matchup, Kevin, what's the big thing for Baltimore here entering week one?
I think obviously it's a new season, and that's what the Ravens have been telling us. You know, that divisional round game, obviously very high stakes, and the way that it ended for Baltimore was unfortunate. They just made too many mistakes, and credit to the Bills, they capitalized on those mistakes and were able to get the job done. You know, Mark Andrews has talked about it after his rough game. You know, Lamar Jackson had a couple of those turnovers as well. Lamar talked to the media on Wednesday and essentially said, hey, let's not turn the ball over this time. Like, that's the big thing for Baltimore. And I think it's interesting because on the injury side of things, both teams are dealing with some question marks when it comes to some key contributors. For the Ravens, Isaiah Likely and Patrick Ricard both did not practice. We got word from Ian Rappaport on Wednesday that it's unlikely that Likely will play in this game. Jair Alexander, though, one of their free agent additions, he did return to practice. And I think that for this game, at least, the name of the game might just be depth. And for the Ravens, they are deep. The Bills, they are deep as well. But I think at certain spots, you know, obviously, I know we'll get to the Bills side of things in a minute here, but Mark Andrews, I think, is in line, hopefully for his sake, for a big game. Now, we'll talk about some of the matchups a little bit later in the show, but the big storyline for the Ravens is just being able to start fast after what happened last season, which was an 0-2 start for them, and they almost went 0-3 if they luckily did not blow the game in the fourth quarter to the Dallas Cowboys in week 3, but they were able to kind of defy the odds on that 0-2 start. They made the playoffs, got the 3 seed. They don't want to go through that again. And for the Ravens' perspective, their schedule, they start off with 5 of their first 6 games being against division winners from last season. So they can't really afford to kind of come out of the gate, get that feeling out period. Neither can the Bills, right? It's all ships ahead, all things go. And for the Ravens side of things, they have to start fast because this AFC with the Bills, Ravens, Chiefs, et cetera, it's going to be competitive.
Yeah, the Ravens to me are a wagon once they get going. But to your point, yeah, they kind of had a bit of a slow start last year, and I think defensively at times they've started slow. And so if they can avoid that, obviously that's going to position themselves to go on that deep run and get those playoff games in Baltimore. When I think about this game from the Bills side of things and what that biggest story is for Buffalo, it's the defense. You know, the Bills have made significant investments in this defense this offseason, and they needed to. The Bills' third down defense was terrible last year. Talking about the 29th third down defense in the league. They're 23rd in EPA per pass. I mean, they just couldn't get off the field. They really couldn't stop the pass. And the offseason was about the defense, bringing in a Joey Bosa and Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hoyt. And the Bills didn't have a ton of cap space. They made it work. They needed to get those players, and then they get to the draft in April, and their first 5 selections are on the defensive side of the football, including 3 defensive linemen and trading up for 2 defensive tackles. Well, welcome to the NFL. Here's the Baltimore Ravens and that dynamic backfield of Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. You better be ready to go. They've also made coaching additions with Ryan Nielsen and Mike Pellegrino and Jason Riprovich, very experienced NFL defensive coaches added to this mix. So it's all about this defense and how it can improve year over year. And it's been kind of like a 2-year decline. The Bills under Sean McDermott, the first 6 years, it was really good defensively, but the last 2, you started to see some chinks in the armor. I think some of that's aging, right? To Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer at safety kind of aging, and you've had injuries to guys like Matt Milano and Von Miller and Tre'Davious White. Those are supposed to be cornerstone players of your defense, and they haven't really been there over the last 2 years, and you felt that. And now the Bills have kind of reset with a new nucleus defensively in terms of personnel. Of course, it's, like I mentioned, the coaching additions, and now it's time to deliver. And boy, talk about a tough assignment. Week 1 against this Ravens team that I think they show up with 200 rushing yards and 30 points. And so it's a big task. And, it'll be looked at as a measuring stick game for this Bills defense, but I'm not sure it's going to tell the story. That's a lot that needs to come together against a Ravens offense with a lot of continuity and obviously a lot of firepower.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see from both teams' perspective. Obviously, there's a lot made, Joe, about how teams go about playing their stars or not playing their stars in the preseason.
Yeah.
From the Ravens side of things, they played no one, and they didn't play anyone last year, and they started 0-2. If we again kind of see the Ravens come out, there's a little rust or any of that, the Bills are a good enough team. In fact, they're beyond a good enough team to take advantage of that and say, hey, you're giving us opportunities again, like you did in the divisional round, go win the game. So it's going to, I think, maybe it comes down to which team starts the fastest. And another thing that I think is a storyline for honestly both the Ravens and the Bills is these were the 2 best red zone offenses in the league last season. The Ravens were number 1. The Bills were number 2. Their defenses in the red zone were kind of in the middle of the pack. The Ravens were 12 and the Bills were 16. So this could just come down to who puts the ball in the end zone more, because I don't expect it to be like last year's regular season game. Obviously, that was just like the Derrick Henry first play from scrimmage set the tone, and that was kind of that. Plus, we know the Bills are dealing with injuries on defense and the whole 9 yards there. But in my opinion, this is going to be a close game. We'll talk about it in the final part of the show. Could just be like, hey, Tyler Bass and no more Justin Tucker in Baltimore. It's now rookie Tyler Loop. Can those guys take advantage of the opportunities they're given? But are they even given opportunities? Because ideally, both teams, they just want to put the ball in the end zone all the time.
Yeah, you got to get in the end zone. You got the type of quarterbacks that score a lot of points. Hey, listen, the Bills didn't play their guys really in the preseason. This is the first preseason so far in Josh Allen's career where he didn't play at all. And the starters, I think, got maybe a quarter in the first preseason game, and that's it. So you got 2 teams that I think in some ways are coming in cold. Foil that against what the Bengals were doing with Joe Burrow. They're trying to start fast, and they said, Joe Burrow, go here and take all these snaps. We're seeing him get tossed around. It was kind of tough to watch, but we'll see how these contrasting approaches to the preseason and how that pays off when it comes to week 1. All right, coming up next, matchups that will change the game. There's a lot to get into, folks. Be sure to stick with us. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more time every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down for the Bills. The guy who delivered this offseason was Tyrell Shavers. He spent 2 years on the practice squad as a UDFA. He said last year, I did enough to make the roster. Well, he didn't make the roster. He still put it all together this year, made the 53 as an undrafted free agent out of San Diego State.
For the Ravens side of things, you have Keon Martin, who didn't even sign with them during the initial undrafted free agent period. He was a rookie minicamp signing. He made the 53-man roster in a really crowded secondary. He performed in all 3 games, pick 6, big run stops, even on special teams. When the pressure was on, Keon Martin absolutely came through. No hesitation, no delay on that.
And just like with Keon Martin and Tyrell Shavers, delivered for the Bills and Ravens, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You save on every Saturday order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Joe Marino, Locked On Bills. Kevin Ostreicher, Locked On Ravens, getting ready for Sunday Night Football in Week 1. And we're now going to focus in on the matchups that will change the game. I've got a bunch of stuff written down here. I'm sure you do as well. But I want to talk about CB2 for the Bills. This is a different situation than I think they anticipated. Obviously, Christian Benford's the CB1, but who's playing opposite of him? Well, they drafted Maxwell Harrison in the first round to do that. He's on injured reserve to start the season. And then it's a familiar friend, Tre'Davious White. Little opportunity there late in the season with Baltimore where he actually kind of played a lot better than he did early in the year with the Rams. He's kind of the guy that's going to play, and we'll see. He hasn't practiced in a couple of weeks. He didn't practice on Wednesday. They haven't ruled him out for Week 1, but if it's not him, Kevin, this could be Dorian Strong, a rookie out of Virginia Tech, a 6th-round pick that could be starting against the Ravens in Week 1. If not him, you're talking Jamarcus Ingram. Bottom line, it's a question mark. Even if it was Tre'Davious White, it's a question mark. And so, whether it's Rashad Bateman or the new addition Hopkins, there could be some opportunities there in the passing game for Baltimore against whoever's at CB2 for the Bills.
Yeah, and this isn't – the Ravens have put together the best receiving group of the Lamar Jackson era right now with obviously Zay Flowers, Bateman, Hopkins. Those are the three right now. I think you feel pretty confident. And even if Isaiah likely doesn't play, which again doesn't seem very likely at this point, no pun intended there. But I do think that with the Bills, it's going to be a matter of can they shut down. Essentially, I'm going to put it on Rashad Bateman. I'm going to say like Rashad Bateman versus whoever is out there for the Bills could be a defining matchup because I think that you're going to want to send attention to Mark Andrews. You're going to want to send attention to Zay Flowers. And so you're going to put your top guys over there. And that's kind of like that's what you're going to do if you're Buffalo. But in my opinion, Bateman is kind of an X factor in this one for me because we saw the breakout from him last season. He and Lamar Jackson, there was a big question mark because they really didn't play together a ton prior to last year. They both stayed healthy. They both were able to establish a rapport. And we see with a more balanced offense with what Todd Monken runs, it's a lot different than Greg Roman. We see the ball put in Lamar Jackson's hands. He has the keys to this offense, so he's able to check out a play, something that was made clear over the offseason. Lamar didn't have a ton of freedom with Greg Roman. We've seen the evolution of Lamar Jackson over the last couple of years with Todd Monken. And in year 3, I expect that connection to be even stronger. But speaking of the Ravens offense versus the Bills defense, that guard spot for the Ravens, particularly the right guard position, Daniel Falele, there's been concern in Baltimore, not least the fan base and in pundits, not necessarily the team. The team is all in on him. But Ed Oliver, whoever's in the middle for that Bills defense, going up against the Ravens guards, even have the inexperience of Andrew Voorhees at the left guard position. Tyler Linderbaum, to me, is fine. You don't have to worry about Tyler. He'll do his thing. But the inexperience / question marks of the guard positions versus that Bills interior, especially for the Ravens, if they just want to power bully ball run, which might be a little difficult if they don't have Patrick Ricard in, which is a different conversation. We'll see if he's able to play or not. But this is kind of a good test for these guards early on against good players on that Bills defense. We know that for Buffalo, and I thought Buffalo's run defense was kind of given the short end of the stick last season. I think people talk about them like they are the worst run defense in the league last year at times, which they were not. They were not great, but they weren't terrible. I think that to me is a huge matchup.
Yeah, if you like EPA, then it'll tell you a great story about the Bills' run defense. If you care about like yards per rush, then it's not going to tell you a great story. Yeah. So pick your metric and let it fit your narrative. But I had the guards down for Baltimore as something that I wanted to bring up as well, where it's such an interesting interior offensive line. I think the world of Tyler Linderbaum, he's probably a top 3 center in the league. And then it's like, all right, who's the bumpers? You got this 400-pound dude in Falele, who I think he can move bodies in the run game, but I think the lack of movement skills kind of show up from time to time in pass pro. And then Voorhees, which a 7th-round pick in 2023, which was mostly due to injuries in college. He's a good college player at USC, but injuries affected that. And he's relatively inexperienced. I think less than 300 career snaps under his belt to this point. And so for the Bills, you got to be looking at that as an opportunity, whether it is Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones as your starters, but also you drafted supremely athletic guys in TJ Sanders and Deion Walker. It's their first NFL game for sure, and that matters a ton, but there should be athletic matchup opportunities there to be, wreak some havoc and get into the backfield. And I think that's probably your best opportunity to get this Ravens offense out of rhythm, which is tough to do. But, if there's a path to do it, it's probably with the Bills defensive tackles against those guards. Kevin, I want to ask you about Trent Simpson. This is a reasonably high pick recently. I felt like he got an opportunity to start last year. He was benched, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And now he's back in this lineup, right, as the expected player next to Roquan Smith. Where's he at? And what level of concern is there about him and maybe where the Bills could put him in conflict?
There's less concern about him than there was after the first 2 weeks of the preseason. I honestly thought he had lost the job to Teddy Buchanan, the Ravens' 4th-round pick out of California, or just even Jay Higgins, who was an undrafted. I didn't think he should have gone undrafted, but he was undrafted out of Iowa. But Trenton, I think, showed a lot in that final preseason game against the Commanders, and I think that's what he should have done. No one was really playing any starters by that point, so you would hope that he could flash. But Trenton is an interesting case study because, he has that athleticism, the sideline to sideline speed, but, he just hasn't been able to take advantage of his opportunity. And you mentioned it last year. He started for the Ravens, but really couldn't take hold of his opportunity and ended up getting benched for guys like Malik Harrison, Chris Board, even a guy like Christian Welch. All 3 of those guys are no longer in Baltimore. So it was either going to be Simpson, Jay Kummel, who's more of a special teams player. You have Buchanan there. I think that if the Bills, and this is what we saw in week 1 against the Chiefs last season for the Ravens, is the Ravens had a lot of issues covering out of the slots because they would move their linebacker over, and it was Roquan, it was Trenton Simpson, it was Malik, it was everybody getting beat in the slot. So I think if there's a weakness for Trenton Simpson, he can't get washed out in the run game. We've seen that too often. Sometimes the play recognition hasn't been there for him. It's been a slow development, and everybody kind of had him tabbed to be Patrick Queen's replacement and have him fit in pretty seamlessly. But I don't know how much the Ravens are going to run just a pure base defense, or if they're going to keep 2 inside linebackers out there the whole time. They can play dime. They can play heavy DB packages. And obviously it depends what the Bills throw out there, because if they do go heavier, which of course we're going to see a little bit.
I think they will. They will. Yeah.
It's exactly what Trenton Simpson's going to have to do and go out there and perform. So definitely a little bit of a question mark spot for Trenton Simpson, but I'm curious to see how the Ravens match up personnel wise with Buffalo this year. I want to ask Joe a little bit about the safety spot in Buffalo right now. I think when you look at the defense, you mentioned they heavily invested in that unit, particularly up front, but it's Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop right now. You have a couple of other guys behind them. Is that a concern point right now? How do you expect Buffalo to kind of deploy those guys as the season goes on, particularly obviously in this matchup?
Well, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are not walking through those doors. Let me just tell you that. I think Taylor Rapp's a good player, and I think he's really actually against a team like Baltimore, where I think Taylor Rapp might be one of the best tackling safeties in the league. He's not super dynamic in terms of range and athleticism, but he's a smart, instinctive player that's a very good tackler, and he'll hold his own. He's an important player, and he's a good starter. Then you just don't know. Cole Bishop was a 2nd-round pick last year out of Utah, and he was injured pretty much his entire offseason leading up to the year, and DeMar Hamlin winds up starting. Cole just always kind of felt behind. And then you fast forward this year and there's some momentum there, obviously a high pick, and you're wanting this to materialize. And then he misses a bunch of time again during the training camp and preseason, but did get the last, about month back, and he's been in the lineup, and developing that rapport with Taylor Rapp. And he's certainly athletic and he's got a high pedigree, and the Bills are very good at developing safeties, but we got to see it. And, it's a tough matchup, and you're going up against Baltimore in week 1, and he's got to be able to deliver in this game, and so that's definitely a concern. He's got a lot of skill. It's just the time on task, the reps. We haven't seen the true skill set show up like I'm sure the Bills intended to with him as a 2nd-round pick. So that's definitely a good call out by you as an opportunity for Baltimore to test a guy that's not been tested. I want to throw out one more thing here. I think the world of Spencer Brown, the Bills' right tackle. I think he's a top 5 right tackle in the league. But that Kyle Van Noy dude gives him some trouble, man. I'll tell you, this Kyle Van Noy, I think he's meant to be a Baltimore Raven, right? I know he's like way older than you think he's going to be, right? I think he's 34, something like that, 35. And I think he'll be a Raven for as long as he wants to continue playing football. Yeah. But he gives Spencer some challenges. And so I'm looking for that matchup as it's good on good. For sure. Yeah. And I'm looking for Spencer Brown to kind of bounce back and play to his capability this time against Kyle Van Noy.
Yeah, KVN's been incredible. And not a lot of people really realize kind of the redemption arc that Kyle Van Noy has had with the Ravens. I mean, he's been unbelievable, especially for, he's 34 and a half, like you said he is. And, he comes in, he's Mr. Consistent over the course of his career. But before coming to Baltimore, he never had more than 6.5 sacks in his career. Came to Baltimore off his couch in the middle of September in 2023, had 9 sacks off the couch during that season. And then obviously made the Pro Bowl, his first ever Pro Bowl appearance through 11 years. And he had 12 and a half sacks last year. I mean, he was insane. He's unreal. I mean, and the thing about Kyle Van Noy that I love is that he always seems to step up in the big moments here where, there'll be a tough third down where the Ravens really need to get a stop, or even just like on a first down, he'll stop a guy in the backfield for like a 4-yard loss. He just always seems to be there. And the Ravens last year, in terms of team sacks, they were second in the league, only behind the Broncos with 54 sacks. Denver had 63. But in terms of pass rush consistency, some of the advanced metrics, they were only middle of the pack. It seemed like they had explosion games where they would have like 7 sacks in a game as a team. Odafe Owe would have like 3 sacks himself, but then they'd really not be able to generate pressure for like the next 2 or 3 games. And then they'd have another 7-sack game. And you're like, okay, those numbers are a little misleading. So actually, despite the fact that Van Noy and even Owe, who had his first double-digit sack season, they were good last season. I think one of the big goals for the Ravens, and even when you get pressure on, and that's what Lamar and Josh do best, right? They're able to escape pressure, make big plays, and make spectacular throws on the run. There are multiple levels to stopping a guy like Lamar or Josh. So you have to win the rep and then get Josh or Lamar down. Yep. That's going to be key for both teams for sure.
Contract year, Odafe Owe. I'm curious to see what that looks like. Mike Green in the mix as well. That Ravens pass rush could be something this year. But to your point, I think you had 2 of the top 3 players in the league in Lamar and Josh Allen in not allowing pressure to turn into sacks. I think Lamar was like 11% and Josh is like 8.9%. So that's like 90% of the time you pressure these dudes, they don't go down. It's pretty insane stuff. Special quarterbacks. Don't miss this one on Sunday night. If you're listening to this, I know that you won't. All right, coming up next, what each team needs to do to win. We're really going to get down into the nitty-gritty here. Folks, be sure to stick with us. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive. And that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. Mazda offers more than safety. It's won more 2025 IIHS Top Safety Pick awards than anyone else. You can feel it the moment you get behind the wheel, the smooth handling, intuitive controls, and standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. Whether it's a quick drive to practice or a weekend road trip, Mazda makes even everyday drives feel special. It's the small details that make the big plays, and just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Folks, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Check this out right now. New customers can bet just $5, and if it wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however I like to bet, whether that's over-under, spreads, player props. You can build a same-game parlay or even jump into live action with live betting as it unfolds. It makes games even more exciting, more thrilling, whether you're watching your favorite team, keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup, or just trying to make something you're watching more exciting. So are you ready to play? If so, download the FanDuel app now or visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. Place that first $5 bet. If it wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets. Joe Marino, Locked On Bills. Kevin Ostreicher, Locked On Ravens. It is time to discuss the path to victory, what these teams need to do to win. And so, Kevin, as we get into this, I think the number one thing for the Bills, and I'm sure you're going to agree with this from the Ravens side of things, don't commit the back-breaking turnover. And look, these are 2 special offenses last year in being highly prolific and not turning over the football. These teams were top 3 in lowest turnover rate per drive in the National Football League last year. But when you look at the head-to-head battles between the Bills and the Ravens, it has always come down to which team makes the back-breaking turnover. Go back to the playoff game. Of course, the Ravens had their share of back-breaking turnovers, and some of those unforced. Go back to the week 4 matchup. That was a blowout. The Ravens controlled that game, but if you remember, there was the trick play that the Bills ran. Kyle Van Noy had the strip sack, and I don't know that the Bills were going to come back, but it felt like they had a little momentum. That ended any hope that the Bills are going to be competitive in that game. Go back to the 2022 win that the Bills had over Baltimore. The Lamar Jackson interception to Jordan Poyer in the end zone. That was the backbreaker, right? The 2020 playoff game, the pick six for Taron Johnson on Lamar. It's always been the team that wins over the last four. Which team doesn't make that back-breaking turnover? I think it's going to be important. It's week one, right? You're talking two alpha quarterbacks, some of the best players in the National Football League. They probably want to go out there and prove something, right? Well, to me, it's going to be about which player can prove to play smart football and not give it away. Don't make that back-breaking turnover.
Yeah, you can't do it. And I know that for the Ravens and what happened in the playoffs, obviously 3 turnovers compared to none for the Bills. And obviously that was one of the big reasons why the Ravens lost in that game is Buffalo protected the football, didn't give Baltimore opportunities. And meanwhile, Baltimore did the exact opposite. And still, I mean, at this point, for me, you look at what the Ravens did last year and even the Bills too. We talked a little bit about the red zone percentage for both teams. Something I'm looking at in particular, third down conversions. The Ravens last season, they were the number 3 third down offense in the NFL. Buffalo was number 7. So 2 top 10 third down offenses. And you want to go back to the playoff game. I know it's a new season, but I just want to, for context, the Ravens went 7 of 10 on third down. The Bills went 5 of 11. So good numbers for both teams. I think, Joe, and this goes for both quarterbacks, the most important thing, and honestly, the best thing you can do to limit the Ravens or the Bills offense, if you're the Ravens or the Bills defense, is just take the ball out of the star quarterback's hands. Force 3 and outs, get them off the field, and eat up clock yourself. I think that, to me, I don't want to call it like whoever wins the time possession battle wins the game, because clearly that doesn't always happen. But, if you go on a couple of long drives, if you're the Bills or the Ravens, if Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen doesn't have the ball in their hands, well, they can't do anything from the sideline.
Yeah, you normally hear other teams talk about that when they're playing the Bills or the Ravens, but they're playing each other, right? And so you're going to crossover Thursdays with with the Bengals people, the Browns. They're going to say things like, keep the ball in Lamar's hands. Okay, sure, that's easier said than done, but that's part of that script. And now you're doing it against another elite quarterback. It's a fun dynamic. I told you that Bills are 29th in third down defense last year. So that's going to be a tall order for Buffalo here in week one. My next thing that I want to get into from the Bills side of things in terms of what they need to do to win the game, this is going to sound really basic, but I'm going somewhere. You need to make Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson be special. We know they can be, right? They've proven that. Well, Derrick Henry's the best running back in the NFL over the last 10 years for my money. Lamar Jackson's every bit of a top 3 quarterback in the NFL over the last 6 years or whatever it's been. These guys are awesome. Like I said already, 30 points per game, most yards per pass last year, most yards per run last year. And I go back to these matchups, like go back to that week 4 route that the Ravens had. Derrick Henry house call, like the first play of the game. With all due respect to Derrick Henry, 100 other running backs would have scored on that play because the Bills didn't get lined up. They wham blocked. There was a huge crease, and Derrick Henry was off to the races. If he has an 80-yard run or whatever it is, fine. He's Derrick Henry. Have some resistance. You can't give up that play. Lamar Jackson is capable of making any throw in the world. He's unbelievable. But it can't be easy for him. You have to do things to try to get these guys out of rhythm. And if they're going to light you up, which we know they can do, make it be because they did something special, not because you didn't line up, not because you had a coverage bust or you just weren't fundamentally sound. It's early in the season. Fundamentals matter the most. You have to make Lamar and Derrick Henry be special. They can do it, but don't make it easy for them.
It's a good point. And I think for the Ravens on the opposite side of that, it's kind of similar, but a little bit different in terms of kind of like, you got to make the Bills offense one-dimensional if you are the Ravens. Now, that's a lot easier said than done because Josh Allen can be both the throwing offense and the running offense if they do shut down a guy like James Cook, and you still have that dual threat ability. And honestly, that goes for both offenses. But, to me, I think shutting down James Cook and essentially, like, look, Josh Allen can beat you, right? If you say, hey, Josh, go out there, throw the ball, beat us. Yeah, you can do that, right? But you don't want to make it so that you're guessing. You want to kind of narrow it down to having the least amount of possibilities possible. And I think that if you can take James Cook out of the equation, and we know that Baltimore's run defense last year was absolutely exceptional. They dominated in that facet. They were the number one rushing defense, giving up just 3.6 yards per carry over the course of the regular season. It was really the pass defense that lagged behind for the first part of the season. And then that obviously ended up coming into shape once they benched Marcus Williams. Eddie Jackson was like that whole situation happened. But stopping James Cook early, not letting him get into a rhythm and saying, hey, can Josh Allen, Josh Palmer, can they establish a connection early, right? The two Joshes. Can Khalil Shakir, assuming that he plays in this game, I know it's still a little bit up in the air right now. Is that right, Joe? It's still
he's full practice on Wednesday. I think he's good.
All right. So it looks like he's good to go. So can Khalil Shakir step up? And obviously we know he can find soft spots in the defense. I'd rather have the Ravens, if they were to lose this game, I'd rather have them lose knowing that they eliminated part of the Bills' game plan and not just being thrown all over the field on, which again, Jair Alexander being limited on Wednesday will hopefully be good for his availability. But I think, everybody talks about Josh Allen and stopping Josh Allen. I would rather stop James Cook and say, hey, Josh, go beat us. And if he does, you live with that because we know how good of a quarterback Josh and obviously Lamar Jackson is too.
The last thing that I had down for keys for the Bills is to offensively involve the running backs in the passing game. The Ravens last year, they conceded the most passing yards in the league to running backs. They gave up a lot of production to inline tight ends as well. Actually, third most yards per game to inline targets. And so the Bills have three good pass catching backs in James Cook, Ty Johnson, and Ray Davis. And Dalton Kincaid, there's a lot of expectations for him as a first round pick at tight end. They do have Dawson Knox as well. This needs to be a big part of the Bills' recipe offensively. And look, I'm sure the Ravens are obviously aware of the metrics I just said. They've probably been working hard on trying to fix those things, but prove that they have. And obviously I think that'd be an important strategy for Buffalo to get the running backs and tight ends involved in the passing game.
Yeah, and that's a good one. And honestly, for Baltimore, it's kind of the same thing where Derrick Henry, he is most in, like we saw in that 80-yard run, which again, great blocking from the Ravens, great setup. But the further he gets in on a play, the more he goes down the field, the harder he is to stop. He's like a train engine, just
business decisions, Kevin. That's what's going on out there. Those DBs don't want to tackle him. Come on,
look.
Now.
If I was out there, I'd also make a business decision. So I don't blame any of these guys for going out there and doing it. But the running backs, Justice Hill, they love to send him on wheel routes from the Ravens side of things here. Keaton Mitchell is back. We might see a couple of Keaton Mitchell plays in this game with his electricity. But as I mentioned earlier in the show, this game also, I think, could come down to special teams with obviously a rookie kicker making his debut in a stadium that's very hard to play in. And now he's going there in September, not in January. So obviously it's a little bit different, but even still, tough place to play. And you obviously look at the return situation for Baltimore. They drafted LaJohntay Wester in the 6th round out of Colorado, who had a couple of really nice returns, including a touchdown on a punt return. The Ravens special teams unit has been kind of in the middle over the last couple of seasons in coverage units and return ability. So getting off to a fast start there, I think, is going to be really important.
The Bills have given up a special teams touchdown 3 of the last 4 week ones. So
wow,
there you go. You're on it. I think special teams could matter. The Bills are nervous about special teams as well. They've fired their special teams coordinator. Chris Tabor steps in. Questions about, Tyler Bass has had pelvic area soreness. He's barely kicked this offseason. Got a new punter in Brad Robbins, who was a disaster for the Bengals in 2023. Didn't kick last year. So there's some special teams questions for Buffalo as well. Kevin, the Bills and Ravens they're not divisional rivals. But I got a feeling we'll be doing another crossover in January.
I agree with you, Joe. I think we'll be back here in a couple months talking about a game with much higher stakes than this one.
You got it. All right. For Kevin Ostreicher, I'm Joe Marino. Thanks for being here. As always, we kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Plenty of coverage still to come this week on Locked On Bills and Locked On Ravens. Don't miss any of it. Look forward to Sunday night. Thanks for being here. We'll catch up with you again real soon.